Welcome to our second day, our deliberations on the long-term plan, and we're just commencing or recommencing where we left off yesterday afternoon. So thank you. Nothing here. So I think we'll just go straight to our topic number 8. Oh, apologies. Yes, apologies. Beg your pardon. Thank you. Apologies. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Berryman Kemp. Thank you. Councillor McPherson, thank you. Is Trevor coming? Thank you. Well, thank you. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, at those two? Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Thank you, Councillor Yates. So if we moved and seconded, all those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Carried. Declarations of interest too. Thank you. Declarations of interest? No, thank you. So, topic number 8, infrastructure strategy. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, that the committee recommends to Council to adopt the 30-year infrastructure strategy and notes that approximately 55% of the total capital expenditure program is supporting delivery of the infrastructure strategy. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Thank you, Your Worship. So, thank you. And so we're just going to open it up. Thank you. For some discussion on the infrastructure strategy. Yes, Your Worship.
Well, I find this is a most significant issue, and the one that got the least opposition, actually, when we took out the 5 issues and challenges to the public without exception, other than trying to enhance even further. The majority of submissions agree that this is so important, underpinning all of our other strategies in this LTP, that it's absolutely critical that we keep investing to 55% on our infrastructure. I'd just like to say first, congratulations on the detail in this actual section. It's probably because we've done so much work also about the 3 waters. But the detail in here, I think, for the public who are listening, may not have realised the extent of investment in our roads, our bridges, culverts, footpaths, cycle lanes, bus shelters, pump stations and the rest, and didn't really realise what infrastructure totally encapsulated. And particularly with some of the challenges that we've seen happen even this year, that are of great community challenges. The one thing that we've been able to say back is we're addressing our investment in infrastructure over the next 10 years, and that is of some comfort because the infrastructure is definitely ageing. So I believe it's a very responsible position here. Very clearly outlined. You don't sweat these assets and think you're going to get away with it. That's a practice of the past. You invest in these infrastructure that actually impacts on everybody's life, whether they're rural, lakes, Te Tato, district or CBD. They all expect everything to work every day. And so this is particularly important. The hui, I really enjoyed hearing the challenge from those at Te Takinga about drinking water. Tarawera also reaffirming the need to, while investing in a scheme there, please help us with an ability or a mechanism to make it affordable to pay, which we do need to look at. And also there were some saying go a bit further. If you're looking at infrastructure for sewage, reticulated sewage out there, look at our drinking water. So you can see that people are very focused in the long term on the value of smooth functioning infrastructure. So this is a great detailed report. I'd also like to say that in terms of discussions in the wider region about 3 waters and where that's going, we're very well placed because of the detailed analysis we did as a council on our decisions around Trinity. So this is a good investment. Probably the only bit of feedback was go a little bit further. So that's very affirming from all of the public meetings and the feedback that we got. And it's also very educative about issues like, I think even for Ngāpuna that had the problem there, they realised that's not the only pump station, that there are actually many others in our community, and it's all here about, so many, 81 wastewater pump stations in the district. What a massive network to have to keep on top of at the same time as replacement and maintenance, investing in new infrastructure. So this meets all our aspirations. It meets our aspirations for growth and also our aspirations about climate change and the environmental impact. Our lakes are absolutely critical, our lakes' waters. That argument is well and truly won. People are just saying there's different bespoke solutions on different lakes, and they need to be met, and they'll have a different infrastructure investment proposition. So I'm very supportive of this recommendation, and we'd be foolhardy if we tried to pull back on any of this investment for our well-being of our community.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Any other further questions on our... Yes, Mr. Thank you. Persini Tuli.
Kia ora tātou. I think what we like about the plan is that it is 21st century focused, but we would also like to, like Her Worship just said, there are parts outside of the CBD that get ignored often. The further away you are from the heart, the less likely you are to get equitable services. So long as the mana whenua aspects of all of this infrastructure is acknowledged and those relationships are developed with each hapu, because one big plan across one big city is fine, but each hapu has its own jurisdiction and its own mana, and would prefer to have the relationships as they've been developed for the JMAs and different partnerships. And also that the infrastructure remains inclusive of our growing population. Because there's been a lot of talk amongst the geeks, how do we create a smart city? And how do we create that digitally connected and culturally sustainable city, that we grow that reputation? Every city is trying to get infrastructure all across the world, but what makes us unique? So I think by looking at what makes us unique, and for me as Te Aroa, by creating those dynamic relationships, hapu by hapu, whānau by whānau, and bringing the kaitiaki in, then I think this plan will go beyond that. So kia ora.
Thank you. Mrs. Trumper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just got a couple of minor points, really, and one of them was the Nongataha flood mitigation work that our committee is doing out there, and I know that Bay of Plenty Regional Council has asked for some funding towards that mitigation on Western Road, and I'm sure that Stavros' team has actually got that in hand. But I also wanted to point out that Mamaku has had a development plan from 2009, and one of the things that the Rural Community Board will be recommending to the infrastructure team is that that plan is reassessed and it is reviewed to make it more fit for purpose and actually caught up. And the same with the drainage in Rotorua. So stormwater is paid for by all ratepayers. It's not just urban that meet the stormwater costs. And so we need to make sure that there is a maintenance plan included in that infrastructure strategy going forward. But other than that, the rural community support it 100%.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, look, I think from the Lakes community, we're very supportive of this as well. I do note the earlier comments about needing to make sure that we look after infrastructure outside of the urban area as well. And I would like to thank Council for earlier this year moving the recommendation that we explore the feasibility of water supplies, not necessarily committing ourselves to them, but actually looking to see how feasible they are. And that's a huge important issue for our communities. We do realise that that is going to be impacted by the Three Waters discussion. But also the other thing that comes up for us on an ongoing basis is footpaths, shared pathways, things like that. So the ability for people to move around within our communities, especially in those communities that have high-speed state highways in them. It's one thing walking along a footpath where the cars are going 50 kilometres an hour. It's quite a different thing when they're doing 80 or 100. It's quite frightening. So we're very supportive of the infrastructure strategy.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further discussion? Otherwise, I'd like to Councillor Bentley, because you moved. Would you like to have a final say, perhaps?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, for once, I fully agree with the Mayor. I think that she said it all, and said it well. So, the only thing that I personally have an ambition to see is, in the future, that we utilise our geothermal asset, especially for this area out Whanganui Road area, where they have drilled a bore, found heat, and I would think that we're sitting on a wonderful opportunity to reticulate heat to all those sections that are going to be going out there, which will make for a unique environment in the future.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bentley. And you are so often referred to the geothermal and what was the potential that we have there, that we just seem to never get on to actually doing something about it, that wonderful resource that we have. And infrastructure, as we know, all around the country seems to be in dire straits, and councils are grappling with it everywhere to try and make sure that they're meeting not only the current needs, but also future needs as well. So thank you. It has been no further discussion? Thank you. So it has been moved and seconded that the committee recommends to council to adopt the 30-year infrastructure strategy, and notes that approximately 55% of the total capital expenditure program is supporting delivery of the infrastructure strategy. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. The Lake Tarawera Reticulation Sewerage Scheme. So I'll ask for a move and a seconder, please. That the committee notes that from 2017, all properties with existing septic tanks should have either connected to a reticulated system or should have upgraded to an aerated wastewater treatment system with nitrogen reductions. The discharge of treated domestic wastewater into the land from an existing septic tank became a discretionary activity. 2, that the committee notes that let me get this right, an aerated, that an AWTS plus, here it is, aerated wastewater treatment system and with nitrogen reduction, which meets the requirements in the offset plan, is estimated to cost $28,000 to install. In addition, the ongoing consenting, operational, maintenance, repair and renewal costs of such system would be the owner's responsibility. Routine maintenance and servicing costs are estimated to be approximately $500 per year. 3, that the committee continue to support the design and delivery of a reticulated sewage scheme for Tarawera. 4, that the committee recommends to council that a Tarawera Sewerage Scheme subcommittee is set up consisting of council officers, Lakes Community Board members and appropriate representation of local residents of Tarawera to jointly develop a set of criteria that lays out clear guidelines on identifying those ratepayers that are not able to provide lump sum repayments at the completion of the scheme and develops viable repayment options for them. Modelling the repayments has been based upon 75% residents being able to pay up front. The outcomes of the subcommittee's work are reported to council before adoption into the scheme's capital funding plan. 5, that the committee supports initial work to progress the detailed design and a scheme procurement process in year 1 of the LTP, bringing forward approximately $2.5 million to provide the community with more certainty on the full project costs and the required household capital contribution. And 6, that the committee supports bringing forward the project from year 5 and 6 into year 2 to 4, subject to continued community support, more accurate costings, and the clearly defined repayment criteria after year 1 of the LTP. So may I please have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. So I'm happy to take, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm very happy to move this. I would just like to make a slight modification to item 4. And at the end of the first sentence, so this is the sentence about establishing the subcommittee to look at payment options. And at the moment, that sentence ends with develops viable payment options for them. I'd just like to drop the for them.
Thank you. Yes,
As seconder, I'm happy with that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we'll just make that, thank you, just not drop off those two words for them and just develops viable repayment options. Very good, thank you, that's clear. So thank you. So you're moving and Councillor Donaldson seconding, is that correct? So that's right, I'm opening it up then. Thank you for discussion. Thank you. I just wonder perhaps if Stavros might be able to give just a quick, if you'd like to. This is I was going to say a biggie, but it is a biggie, so would be quite helpful, just a quick refresh, I think. Councillor Donaldson? You will speak, thank you. Thank you, Stavros.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the recommendation is, fairly self-explanatory. But again, I think perhaps just worthwhile to outline that wastewater regulations around the lake is one of the most tangible actions we can take to protect the water quality around the lakes. With regards to Tarawera, obviously there has been some significant funding supports secured from the Ministry of the Environment with some tangible milestones to be achieved over the next 3 to 5 years, and obviously we need to give effect to that undertaking. We have, following your resolutions in November last year, approached the Tarawera community and sought their views about the reticulation and the proposed payment system and so on. We have written 2 letters to the community. We had a public meeting to discuss and listen to their concerns and issues. And where we are at the moment in broad spectrum is that we've got about 280, 290 responses out of 440 existing properties in there. Out of those responses, with about 63%, I think, from the total population, existing population community in Tarawera, about 65 to 70% are in full support of the reticulation scheme. About 25 to 30% are people who support the scheme but would like to explore some more viable payment options. It's a very small percentage of 5% of the responses who actually do not want to acknowledge there is an issue to be managed, and therefore, I think broadly speaking, the community has some broad level of support for that scheme. I think the recommendations you see in front of you today are responsive to the feedback we had. There were 2 main directions or inquiries or suggestions by the community. One was about the certainty about the final cost of the scheme, and we have outlined that those numbers we gave them were estimates in the absence of detailed design and procurement process to lock down the final cost would be almost impossible to be very accurate, and therefore we're responding to that by doing the design next financial year will give us the most certainty. And the second element, of course, was to develop a set of more flexible payment options for those members of the community who may choose not to pay a lump sum for one reason or the other. And I think the resolutions in front of you reflect that kind of feedback. So thank you. Happy to ask and respond to any questions if you have any.
Question to you, Stavros. In 4, we talk about opening up the subcommittee to council officers. There's been some wider interest. Is there a value having also a regional councillor on that committee? they seem to be trying to work with us to find a solution on this.
I think, Your Worship, I think that certainly the Regional Council have an active interest into the reticulation of Lake Tarawera community, because if I can take a step back, this is not a requirement of the Rotorua Lakes Council. No. The Rotorua Lakes Council simply responded to a requirement by the Regional Council that under the OSET rule, the Tarawera community needs to be reticulated or follow the OSET rule. Now, obviously, the Regional Council do have an active interest, which is fully aligned with our objectives, obviously. And if they can participate in that process, I'm sure they will wish to participate into that, and we'll be more than happy to invite them to take part into the subcommittee.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delighted to see this recommendation come to us as it's laid out here, and I do support that little tweak from Mr. Thomas. As Stavros has just mentioned, without a reticulation scheme at Lake Tarawera, Regional Council have a massive headache trying to enforce the OSET rule, where we know that 170 properties in the 400 odd out there could not accommodate an AWTS plus NR on their properties. So basically they would have to find another option or become uninhabitable properties. So, the big compliance issue for them. So they're very supportive, and this recommendation introduces some flexibility the community's been asking for in some fairly vocal public meetings around how to approach the issue of the funding. And I'm very pleased to see the support for progressing the detailed design, because they do want that certainty around cost and also the flexibility. And it might, it's not necessarily flexibility just for those who need some time payment options. Some may want to front load their payments and do like the old car dealer offers with a third at no interest, and start paying right away, and so that when the scheme's finished they just do a wrap-up sum. So I'd love to see that sort of flexibility around payment options thought about by that community. And as Stavros has outlined, this is an immediate turn-off of, I think it's about 20% of the nutrient entering Lake Tarawera. It is at risk with its lake water quality, and so I think pretty much everyone accepts that it has to happen. There are a few who say outright, we don't want it, and there are some who are in a difficult position, which we've had to deal with other schemes where they have recently installed the advanced wastewater treatment system on their properties, and it's fully compliant with the offset rule. But if reticulation is offered, we need to think about some accommodation for the people in that situation, where they've made the $28,000 investment, but now they're confronted with connecting to reticulation. So, it's. I think with those words, I just say I'm fully in support. Love to see it go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Bassini-Toulé.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to acknowledge the work you've done with communicating with the community more over the past few years. But about that 5% who had opposition, what happens there?
I'm not sure. I think there is a 5% of people who actually appear not to acknowledge that better management of wastewater system will have a tangible improvement of lake water quality. I don't know what the rationale or their views of that, of the situation, but if the majority of the community is going to head in that direction, they will be compelled by the Local Government Act to join the reticulated system.
Councillor Donaldson, you wanted to respond to that, I think.
Yes, if I could just have a second go. Thank you, Madam
Yes.
Chair. So with every sewerage scheme, you will find people who, for one reason or another, say, I've never been consulted and I'm not going to connect, I'm not going to spend this money with everyone. And I think with Lake Rotorua, we're down to 3 properties that we're still working through with that scheme, which was recently installed. But it's similar with any new environmental standard that's brought in. And I think of the Joint Air Quality Committee that Councillor Tapsell and I are on, where people had to get rid of their smoky fires to improve our air quality. And not everyone agrees with that and doesn't agree with the way forward. But at the end of the day, national policy statements on environmental standards and the greater good, it needs to be enforced, and that's the harsh reality of it. So at some point in time, the 5% who say no, we need to have some gentle but firm conversations with.
Thank you. And yeah, for various reasons, as you say, they initially do opt out, but after a period of trying to get them educated into why these things are necessary. Thank you. I'll carry on with the order in which I've taken the hands up. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. And just before I start, I'll just once again about that 5%. We have to remember that whatever their beliefs around water quality and the state of the lake, if there wasn't a reticulated system, they would be up for a very similar cost under the Regional Council bylaw, needing to put in an advanced on-site effluent treatment system. So, not believing that there's an issue is not an answer. They have to do one or the other. And I totally agree with Councillor Donaldson's comment about a firm but compassionate discussion with those people. However, getting back to the scheme, look, I'm really proud to have been able to move this recommendation to Council, and I think we have at Tarawera, like all our lakes communities, we have a very passionate community. They have a love and for their lake. They're very proactive on this, and just as we've seen in our communities around the lakes that were at risk earlier in the decades and in the 2000s, at Tarawera, they're equally concerned about their lake. Although it's in better condition, we have seen that water quality falling. It's important to remember that doing reticulation out there is practically the only action that can be taken in a man-made way to address nutrient loading on the lake, because so much of it's coming in from thermal activity. The Tarawera community have been not only looking at the issues around the OSET rules, but they've actually been very proactive about wanting to reticulate, and that community has been really supportive of this. They've been working on it since 2016, I think, so 5 years worth of work to get us to this point. And we've had a flood of people coming in here, but every meeting I've been to, and I've been to them all over the last 5-6 years, really strong community support to reticulate. I think the hesitancy is only ever around the cost at the moment. So, look, I think this is really worthwhile. I'm really pleased to see that we're recommending bringing it forth to year 1 to do the planning and just to move ahead with it, because one thing we were saying to that community is any delay means the cost will go up. So the sooner we start it, the better. So I think that sort of summarises where I'm coming from on this. It's a great thing to be able to do for Tarawera. I know they're really keen to reticulate. Their concern is purely about the cost. Hopefully that subcommittee will be able to work on some ways around that for people who are in financial strife over it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Councillor Yates.
Tēnā koe, and through you, Madam Chair. Just first, I'd like to acknowledge the proactive community that Mr. Thomas mentioned. They not only demonstrated their passion for their particular community with their submissions, but also came out in force to many of our public meetings as well. Nei rā te mihi kia rātou. I'd also welcome the opportunity to establish a committee. I think the recommendations that we've put forward have been excellent, as well as the payment options, because that came through loud and clear. One of the things that resonated with me when we did have our public consultation hui was that tarawera is not only a part of our community here in Te Arawa, and we consider it a jewel, but it is also a jewel to the rest of our motu who use it daily as well. So it's finding an opportunity, and I do believe that this scheme moving forward will be an opportunity to also address them as well. So nei rā te mihi.
Thank you. Councillor Kai Fong.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. It's just really a question around the funding of this. So some of the residents had given feedback that they felt that the scheme should be funded, if you like, by the council as opposed to by the individual ratepayers. But are we taking it on the basis that 75% of those that responded in full support meant that there was generally full support for full payment as well?
Councillor, yes, of the 280 responses we had, the 65%, support is unconditional. They will pay the full amount as a capital plan proposed. So if you can extrapolate the whole community up there, presumably you can reasonably assume that the vast majority of people will go for a lump sum.
Okay, and just a second question, Madam Chair, just in relation to the funding then, because we, I'm assuming originally when the LTP went out, it was on the basis that we would be looking for full payment, with the other 25% being given potential payment options and payment over a period of time or remissions or some other assistance. How does that affect the overall funding of this project? Is it going to be debt funded then, or will there be some other way of recovering that, or is that a Thomas question?
So happy to answer that. The 25% will be debt funded, and obviously looking to implement a capital target rate to recover that over an agreeable period of time. The financial implications, though, of this recommendation by moving the project forward and then debt funding the other the 25% of the cost means that council will move quicker and closer to the 250% debt limit. We won't go over it, but this recommendation does obviously make that change to our financial strategy. So we're still within that financial strategy, but our debt does go up a little bit higher and quicker as a result of moving the project forward in the plan and taking on a little bit more debt temporarily to help fund it.
Thank you. So, Madam Chair, I'd just like to indicate my support for this project, and I think that that's a prudent use of debt to bring this project forward and get it underway and give some certainty to those ratepayers. So I would support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Kai Fong. Yeah, Your Worship.
Well, this is a huge day, and I'm sort of sorry that Tarawera, you know, they must trust you and trust us as elected members to make the right decision. This hasn't been just since 2016. This discussion began in 1999 about the ownership of our lakes, and then what is the condition of our lakes when they're handed back to Te Arawa. And this was one of the lakes that missed out on deed funding. Deed funding just meant it attracted funding from the Crown as well to clean up our lakes, and it sat outside and it languished, but that community didn't languish. They kept really active here. And I want to acknowledge Anaru Rangihuia, who I remember in 1999 said that we've got to get that paru out of our lakes, and I don't mind if it goes across my farm to get to a system to get into town to be treated at the treatment plant. And that leadership was very, very bold of him, as well as leading the ownership of the lakes back to Te Arawa. But this lake also in the conversations, it's not just of extreme importance locally. This is a national treasure. Just like our museum, when you look at our lakes, our roto, it's Tarawera that you often see as an iconic lake. and yet it's had to wait this long, but its day has come, and I do wish they were sitting in the Galleria, but they might be watching. And I want to congratulate particularly Libby Fletcher, who chairs the Ratepayer Association, who has worked with mana whenua and sought guidance about how they can keep this alive, this hope alive, and she has been a respectful advocate, always, knowing that we're trying to deal with the other lakes, all of the other lakes that we've reticulated, and waiting their turn but getting impatient. So they will be really delighted by this decision. They will love the fact that there's going to be a committee set up with representation from residents of Tarawera and mana whenua about how can we make this affordable, and also the respect for bringing it forward is going to be hugely received. The other aspect, and you don't often acknowledge your colleagues, but Dave Donaldson and Phil Thomas have been incredible advocates for these schemes around our lakes. It's an enormous amount of work, taking part in cultural impact assessment committees and putting our view across that 20 years ago wasn't a very good view, but lately has been much more easily worked through. So well done for your advocacy in here too, and also to you, Stavros, because it's not easy in your job. I know there's been times that you had to say this is a political decision. Well, this is our day to make that political decision and to show to the wider community as well as the community of Tarawera that we really do value and treasure our lakes. Our lakes' water quality really does matter. And all of those communities that live and have an economic activity around our lakes, we take their view into consideration too. So this, I am so pleased to see 4 in here, 4 and 5, bringing it forward. This is one of the most significant decisions that we've made as a council this term, and I'm fully in support of this resolution.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I don't know if you saw this morning, but beautiful Tarawera was mentioned on the AM show this morning by retired coroner Wallace Bain. Oh. He talked about the beautiful lake. He took the host some smoked trout, and not only that though, he did actually mention in glowing terms the community of Tarawera, the folks there, and how he loves living there, and also about the lake as well. So that was just lovely to hear our wonderful lake being mentioned this morning. Are there any further questions? Thank you. No. Mr. Thomas, as the mover, would you like to, thank you, say?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you again. Look, the Mayor thanked all the people that I was wanting to thank, but I did also want to mention particularly Libby Fletcher, who has been a long-standing and staunch advocate for this, and as the Mayor said, she has worked closely with mana whenua out there to get this over the line. So congratulations to her and the whole team that have been working on it. Want to thank Stavros as well for his continued working on this and support and helping steer through a viable scheme for that community. There have been frustrations along the way, but this is a great outcome. So, and I would like to assure the Mayor that this will be watched online. Every time we debate Tarawera, it is watched online. I get the feedback straight afterwards. So, and then finally, I would also like to thank councillors for all their positive comments about this today. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make sure, because we took out those 2 words for them, I just want to make sure that we're talking about only those that applies only to those that are not able to provide the lump sum repayments, that only applies to them. So just, I want to make sure that we're just right on that. Oh, sorry, Councillor Donaldson. Just want to make sure, just so there's no ambiguity around that. Clear guidelines on identifying those ratepayers that are not able to provide lump sum repayments at the completion of the scheme and develops viable repayment options. So it does apply just for them.
Madam Chair, the idea of removing the for them is to actually widen it a little bit so that group, which will include members of Thomas's financial team, I'm expecting and hoping, so that we can look at viable payment options. So there may be
for those that
a
are
bit
not
of
able.
lateral thinking, like the third, which might apply to more people and may be beneficial like that. So I don't think it wouldn't apply just to those who cannot afford the scheme, but it may induce some of those people who are wavering to be able to do it. It is only a recommendation that will come back to Council from that committee, but it just gives a slightly wider ability to look at payment options.
Thank you. I just better get that clarified because I understand, but I want to make sure that that's correct.
So
Yes.
I just need
Thank
to,
you.
through you, Madam Chair, re-clarify my response to Councillor Kai Fong around the financial modelling of this. The changes that are set out here actually leave very little to no room within our financial strategy to consider anything other than the 75% through the lump sum and the 25% through a repayment period or through a capital rate. So while we'd like to explore those other opportunities, our financial strategy doesn't currently allow for that. So I would not want to give you a set of expectations that our financial strategy wouldn't be able to accommodate.
That gives it a bit more clarity around that then. Thank you. Mr. Thomas, yes?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I agree with Thomas, and I think the operative word there is viable payment options. So.
Thank you. Oh, that's good. Just that we're very clear. Thank you. Thank you. Well, it has been moved and seconded. That's correct. Yes, moved and seconded. Points 1 through to 6. Thank you. And they are up on the screen, so I won't read them all again.
Sorry,
beg your pardon?
Can we just have clarification? So just what I'm taking from Thomas is that the repayment options, viable repayment options, are only for the 25% that can't pay. So if you take out the for them now, that is basically how I read it now, is we're going back to the model that Councillor Donaldson. So I just want to be clear what we're actually voting on. If what Thomas is saying is that we're only looking for repayment options for 25% of the people who cannot afford to pay in one lump sum, is that?
Yes,
That is correct. However, I'll come back to Councillor Donaldson. Look, I guess where the opportunity may arise is that if the community is of the view that part of that community wishes to pay early with regards to deposits and over a period of time, that therefore that would fit into our financial strategy. But have an expectation that of that 75%, could more of them go into a longer term repayment and council utilise debt? What I am suggesting is that our current financial strategy does not allow for that. So that would not be as Mr. Thomas suggested, a viable alternative. So therefore we would be looking to have discussions first of all around what is the appropriate criteria and methods and mechanisms for that 25% with regards to leveraging council's debt and allowing repayment over a period of time. If there were other opportunities with regards to giving flexibility, maybe making deposits or lump sums earlier, that could also be explored. But anything short of that would be incredibly difficult to fit at this stage.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. It's very important that we make sure that we're getting this right.
Yeah, through the chair. Look, I think it is actually important to be very clear and set some expectations on behalf of when you make this decision, what can the community take away from it? And as Thomas has outlined, is that the modelling that has been done allows for payment options for 25% of those joining to the scheme. And that really at this point in time is all we've actually got the ability to provide. And so long as that is very clear and is understood by all involved, then the recommendation can stand. But I think just for the sake of clarity, that is the that is the basis on which we're working in the LTP.
Yes, thank you. I think that is clear, and it is important that we make sure that everybody is clearly of the understanding. It's just one moment, please. That's good. We've got on record the comments we've just had, so that does make it clear. So thank you. So we've got the recommendations point through from 1 to 6, and they are up there. I have read them out. We have got a mover and a seconder, so if there's no further questions or discussions, I am going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Topic 10, which is our Westbrook Sports Precinct. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, for the motions? Now, here we go on that were recommendation as per the consultation document, and I will read those out. 1, that the committee supports the ongoing work to address the challenges in the district's provision for quality, open space, sports fields development and housing. 2, that the committee notes that if council proceeds with the concept of a future sports, it is most likely to be a key community discussion on the options within the next long-term plan review, which is 2024 to 2027. 3, that the committee acknowledges the requests within the Save Springfield Golf Course petition to 1, declare the Springfield Golf Course a taonga, and 2, continue leasing the land to the Springfield Golf Club. 4, that the committee directs officers to consult directly with the organisers around any proposal relating to the Springfield Golf Club. 5, that the committee note that the current lease for the Springfield Golf Course does not expire until 2027. 6, that the committee acknowledge the submissions to the LTP with respect to the Westbrook Sports Precinct and directs officials to include these comments as feedback to any proposal relating to the Springfield Golf Course. 7, that the committee note any commitment made by council to develop a future sports precinct will be subject to the development of a full business case and community-wide consultation. And 8, that the committee defer any decision with respect to the lease at the Springfield Golf Course until a decision has been made following receipt of a full business case and community-wide consultation. Could I please have a mover and a seconder?
Madam Chair?
Yes, certainly.
Could I just query recommendation 4 before
Yes.
the motion's put? It's directing that the committee directs officers to consult directly with the organisers around any proposal relating to the golf course. Are we referring to the organisers of the petition, or are we referring to the committee of the golf course? Because I think it should actually, I'm not sure who the organisers are.
No, just a moment, please. I think it's... Sorry, Jocelyn, thank you.
Kia ora. It would be, with the organisers of the petition, because it's just noting above that there was a petition received.
Thank you. Thank you. So do I have a mover and a seconder, please, for that motion? Councillor Donaldson? Sorry, and the seconder was Councillor Yates. Thank you. That's just that we've got a mover and a seconder. So I'm going to open it up for discussion now. Thank you, Mrs. Trumper.
So, Madam Chair, through you, this particular discussion was not a proper LTP discussion document. It did not go out for wider consultation for people. There was no full submission, basically, or no full proposal. So what I'd like to recommend, and this is just based on 27 people who have written in about the Westbrook Sports Precinct, is that this discussion be parked until such time as a full assessment is conducted by council on a future sports facility that is fit for purpose to meet the future needs of the Rotorua community, to then go out for full consultation at the appropriate time, because I do not think that we could actually discuss some of those comments up there because it was just based on not full information.
Thank you.
I know that that's not probably where we should be fitting this, but it was trying to figure out how we get it in.
Thank you, and I appreciate it did come into the LTP, but not in the way that you've just outlined, and thank you. So really what you're asking for actually is an amendment.
Yes, Madam Chair, I am.
Yes. So I just better take some advice on that, because this is a... Thank you. So you're proposing an amendment. I will need a seconder. And again, it really is to park, if I can use that expression. Was that your...
So I've basically recommended that this discussion be parked until such time as a full assessment is conducted.
Well, I think we need to have a seconder first. So I'll seek clarification. Thank you.
I just wish to seek clarification because I read that really as 8. And I wouldn't want the community to feel that we're just parking it out. You know, we heard the submissions, but does 8 not answer the same way answer your request for
So
parkings?
basically, I don't believe that we should be looking at...
Mrs. Trumper, your amendment sounded to be way more than just park, so I just need to get it, if we can just get that.
So I'm happy to reread it.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Okay, so because this discussion was not on the LTP to allow for wider consultation and feedback from our community, that I recommend that the discussion be parked until such time as a full assessment is conducted by council on a future sports facility that is fit for purpose to meet the future needs of the Rotorua community, to then be able to go out for full consultation at the appropriate time, which would be 24/27.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Kaifong.
I wonder, Madam Chair, if effectively what Mrs. Trump has said is actually really what is in the recommendation. So we're actually saying we're not ready to do this yet. We still need to go out and consult. We need to look further at the whole development of the wider sports field issue, as well as the consultation with this golf club and the organisers and the wider community at the appropriate time. So I'm not sure that we need to do any more than what's currently...
Well, otherwise, I mean, then we then move through all of these points. I mean, if that's... we need to get a seconder in a moment. Thank you. I better get this. Thank you.
So I'll just step in through you, Madam Chair. So at the moment you have a substantive motion on the table, which was moved by Councillor Donaldson and seconded by Councillor Yates. You now also have a amendment on the table. To go forward with discussion on the amendment, that would require a seconder. If we don't get a seconder, it reverts back to the substantive motion which is on the table, points 1 to 8. So that might just help the discussion.
I think Rick is trying to get the motion up, the amended motion. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Just to get clarity on what Mrs. Trumper is requesting, is this arising because if you look at the usual council long-term plan process, you wouldn't usually take feedback from one submission and then implement that into the council long-term plan because it wasn't out for community consultation. So if you look at how the long-term plan works, we as an organisation have made some clear recommendations or clear plans or strategies. We've then gone out to the wider community to consult. That community has provided us feedback and then we've made a decision. Whereas in this case, for the Westbrook precinct, we weren't going out for the wider discussion because we were signalling it was in year 7, so it will come into the next LTP discussion. So I'm just trying to clarify, Mrs. Trumper, is that what you're saying? Is that actually this having one specific submission or organisation's feedback as part of a recommendation to a council LTP is actually outside of due process, and while we have already accepted and acknowledged the petition, are you saying that actually we don't need to have this discussion until the next, which was what was in the LTP and what went to the wider community? Is that right? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah. So pretty much that's it in a nutshell. Yeah. It wasn't an appropriate time, and thanks.
It was put in, it's premature, and it really could be seen to be shortchanging the community, in fact. That's really what you're, and that's hence your amendment.
Correct.
Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Yes, Your Worship. I'll take a few comments on that because I've you know, second.
I'm prepared to second that motion.
You're going to second it. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you.
Could I speak to my seconding?
Pardon?
Could I speak to the
absolutely, yes. Please, you can speak to it.
So, because the submitters are here and there's widespread interest in this, I really do believe we were surprised that it got put in by a mechanism of a petition in a public meeting, which we can receive as elected members any time. But this is the LTP. This is the LTP in which we decide, and through our workshop mechanism, these are the key issues we must solve in the next 10 years, and we're going to the community for that. I respect that there's a political action that any individuals and groups can take, and you have, and they have, and that's good politics from a community perspective. But it does sit outside of this LTP. So technically, that's why I'm seconding Mrs. Trumper's motion. But I wouldn't like to kill the discussion that needs to happen, and I'm sure it will, with the wider community, because just as I attended the public meeting, I have been heavily submitted by the wider community about why is this owned by a petition mechanism, and is that how we solve things at this council? So I support Mrs. Trumper's amendment, but I don't want to lose the some of the very good points that were arisen in the petition about us continuing to work with the petitioners. I'd rather keep it separate and in this instance take it out of the LTP discussion. The lease is a red herring because it's not to be renewed anyway till 2027, which is in the process of the next long-term plan. So if I was a political animal externally, I'd use every mechanism too to get an issue that a community cares about before a council. And they've done that very successfully through the petition. And the answer to the petition can be very clean about how we continue to work with the affected community, but also make sure that the wider community has an opportunity to have a part and be consulted appropriately, because this is part of a much bigger discussion. So on those grounds, I support the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I mean, like you, others have contacted, I suppose most of us as well recently, just to say we would have liked to have commented as well. We didn't realise that this was going through the LTP process, as all of that sort of thing. So, look, I am going to take a few more comments. And then, thank you, just so that we can make sure that we're getting this correct. I don't want to cause any further anxiety to our community. So
can I just clarify what is written up there? So I really want to make sure that it's very clear. This is not to park the Westbrook Sports Precinct discussion that is going to be ongoing over the next few years. It was to park the Springfield Golf Course. I've just been reminded I needed to use the correct terminology, and I am happy with the amendment that has been made up there.
Thank you. If we're going to use the correct terminology, could we perhaps use another word than parked?
Yes.
Parked, so that we can
held on the table?
We can let it lie, or
let it lie.
There's got to
on
be
the
a nicer
table?
word than parked, because parked means, well, we're just, I mean, I know what park means.
Deferred.
Deferred.
We're really saying by that, through you, Madam Chair, if it lays on the table, we don't have to make a decision about Springfield Golf Course today. That doesn't stop the discussion about the wider sports precinct with the wider community.
Yes, thank you, and the open spaces and everything. So I can see hands going up left, right and centre. So we do have a mover and a seconder, so I'm just going to take some discussion on that right now. So thank you. Yes, thank you, Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And no disrespect to the amendment that lies there, but if 5,000 signatures and 163 people that turned up that night, besides the 27 not in support and the one in favour of, what does that tell you? The 163 people that came out that night, in full cry of saving the course. What it basically means now is that the Springfield Golf Course cannot decide, but the Westbrook Golf Course, the precinct progress discussions can carry on. I don't think that's fair. I think the Springfield Golf Course has as much right to continue with the campaign to save the golf course and oppose the Westbrook, because this is just handicapping or disabling them, and I do not support this. And I think this is just a hijack of...
well, I'm not going to allow a word like that. I certainly don't want to allow a word like that. And you've just heard explained that this came into the LTP. It was very premature. It's caused anxiety. The wider community wants to have a say as well as the Springfield community. This is quite a significant issue because it's around open spaces. And we've just had that policy that the open spaces policy that we've approved. So it really is quite significant. To a certain extent, we did it to ourselves because we put it into the LTP when actually it needn't have gone in at this point in time. So thank you, Councillor Kumar. Now there was some other, yes, Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to ask a couple of questions before speaking. And one is, whilst it may lay on the table, are we able to separate or take Springfield off the Westbrook proposal project and get on with the mahi there, as well as a question, we don't have to wait till 2027 to make a decision on the lease, do we? Sometimes we plan ahead so that there's surety for them and for us.
Thank you. Just
two questions.
No, well, yes, and to avoid further confusion, I'm going to ask Jocelyn. Jocelyn, if you would like to respond, please, because as you know, a full assessment has not yet been done on this, so thank you.
Kia ora. Yeah, that's correct. We are intending to do a full assessment. It was included in the LTP as it's part of our 10-year plan. It was also included in the 2018 spatial plan. And so in order to have the project moving forward, because we are planning to do further conversations with the community and to provide a complete overview of what is intended for Westbrook, we had to signal it as part of the 10-year plan. With respect to the Springfield Golf Course, it is part of the proposed full precinct, and therefore making a decision now around whether or not to continue the lease without having the discussion around whether or not we proceed with the Westbrook precinct would mean we wouldn't have access to a large proportion of the areas that will remain sports fields or would become sports fields as part of the overall proposed Westbrook precinct, which we don't have full details of at this point.
Thank you. I'll take Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to this Springfield thing, why can we not come to the party right now and say we will not be disturbing the golf course in our 10-year plan? Why do we even have to keep it there, which what we should be doing is providing surety for those people that are utilising this green space, and give them the opportunity to plan for the future within the confines of what they're doing at the moment. We must remember that it is a money-making proposition for this council, and it is, once you walk around it a couple of times, it is a real treasure for the city. And to lose it by creating a sporting precinct which will have several hundred car parks and associated noise pollution is totally the wrong thing to do for that area. And there's plenty of other land in Rotorua which you could utilise.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Jocelyn?
Kia ora, and that's the discussion that we're wanting to have with the community when we go out and do the full consultation process. So at that point, the council can make that decision, and it will be open to the community as well to provide their feedback.
Thank you. And I might add the whole community as well. Thank you. Yes, Your Worship. And then Councillor Donaldson.
To give any comfort to people who are passionate, about their space, and there's lots of other people passionate too about their spaces that they stand on the side of year in, year out, and really want to see a better solution for those. Is there a time frame for the consultation? Because this seems so futures focused. So if that wider conversation, can that be brought forward to be had in the next triennium, prior to just that issue of the 2027 lease? That wider consultation.
I don't know if it's actually wise at this point to put a time frame on it.
Okay.
Your Worship. I mean, it's already been signalled, and I think we've got some outline there of. Yes. So thank you, Councillor Donaldson, then Mr. Thomas.
Before I speak to the amendment, Madam Chair, I'd just like to know: did the mover and seconder consider this replaces the entire proposal?
Yes.
So it's not in addition to point 2, which was in similar vein of the original recommendation. It's a complete replacement.
Yes, yes. This would be a complete replacement, and then that would make all of the other seven points. It would actually take them. Yes, this one takes precedence then. If this one is. So I'm the mover and the seconder.
Yeah, so look, I'd speak against the amendment on those grounds because at least the original recommendation acknowledged the petition, acknowledged those 5,000 signatures that were brought in here, and puts that on record, and clearly says this is a matter for the next LTP. The consultation document, there's no mention of the Springfield Golf Course that I can find in the consultation document, other than a part of a sentence in the auditor's report, which, under the heading of uncertainty over external funding of capital projects, talks about one of them being upgrading the Westbrook Sports Precinct. And so the community hasn't had an opportunity on this consultation process to have that conversation. So I'd be against this amendment. I think the original, in my view, acknowledges the petition, parks it or defers it out to the next LTP, and I think that's the way to go forward. I mean, there's all sorts of coming out of this. Fordlands putting their hands up saying, we'll have it, thank you very much, and that got my brain thinking as well, but no guarantee any of us will be here for the next LTP.
Thank you. I'll just going to Maxwell, sorry. Oh, and Mr. Thomas, thank you.
Was it?
No, Councillor Maxwell.
Okay. I hear what Councillor Donaldson is saying, and I support what he's just said now, that as we do the Planning Act, I don't want to see anything sort of hold up the other things in Westbrook Precinct from having things done. There are other fields there. There are other things that we should be doing. And that's why I asked the question earlier. So I think if we can indicate, that gets back to the amendment. I have to oppose the amendment so we can get back to the, what's the name of there?
Thank you. All right, I'm just, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Look, I'd just like to support the amendment. Unlike most people here, I actually belong to a golf course that got discontinued by, for the benefit of a wider community. I think it would be good to take this off the council table at the moment. So those discussions and workings with staff and with the various communities, developing a plan that can be taken out for consultation is the appropriate way to go. In the situation with the golf course I belong to, in actual fact, it was going to be a total removal of the golf course to start with. In the end, we had a smaller golf course came out of it. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of movement around the sides. We've seen this sort of discussion happening around our sewerage schemes, and we come to not a compromise, but we come to a solution that will work. So I think by removing it from council debate and leaving it with the staff to work on plans with those communities is the appropriate way to go.
Thank you. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to speak against that amended motion. I think the original motion should stand. Although we've said that it wasn't part of the wider community consultation, what we do have is a petition that came to council. They have the opportunity to be heard on that. I think that the recommendation there does set out the steps, and it keeps it more front of mind for everyone, both councillors, council staff and the public, about what the process will be going forward. So I would vote against the current amendment and would like to refer back to the original recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We do have, Councillor Kaifong, from time to time, petitions that are presented to us. They don't usually get lost. They get taken note of, and we look at them to see how they can inform our work as we go forward. So the petition would not be lost, as has been referred to there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it was also just the fact that, we're talking about the wider work to be done around the whole of the precinct, not just the golf course. And I think that the recommendation then sets out the steps for the whole precinct consultation, including the Springfield Golf Club. So I think that's why my preference is for this recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll take one more comment and then I'm going to, one or two more comments, then I'm going to put that amendment, because we've had some good discussion on that. Mr. Tule.
Yeah, kia ora, Madam Chair. I think I applaud any community that sees it wants to develop change inside of its community. But when a small group that is not from their community tries to develop a plan without their community, naturally I'm cautious. As Māori, we've had that done to us many, many times. I've had some whānau approach me about this kaupapa, and it's similar. The process for getting the Springfield Golf Course into the LTP, we could have brought Māori wards into this discussion, but we know that that's a separate process. And so while we talked around it, we didn't want it to kind of over-flavour this. However, I just want to say kia kaha Springfield. I've met enough whānau that are really passionate about their whenua, just like we are about ours. And if it's not by the community, for the community, we should have no part of it.
Now, sorry, there was someone, was it, just a moment, was it Mrs. Oh yes, because you moved, so that's, thank you, right of reply. Councillor Kumar, and then I am going to put that, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm quite passionate about this whole thing, having lived in Springfield and understanding exactly what the community feels and wants, and understanding how devastating it's going to be, not only for the members, but a lot of people that just live around there. I don't think you have to be a golfer to understand just what losing that space will mean. However, I will not be supporting this motion that's sitting on the table, but request that if we can go back to bullet point number 3 and...
No, if you're not supporting it, then thank you, you'll vote accordingly when I call for that in a minute. Thank you. Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, and thank you for indulging me. I've been sitting here having a good listen to the conversation and thank you, Shirley, for bringing this to the table. That's why we're here, to have these discussions openly and frankly. I've been listening to the discussion and I will be supporting the amendment to the motion from Shirley, but because we have already received and acknowledged the petition from Springfield, that doesn't in any way, Shirley's amendment doesn't in any way discredit that petition that we've had. We do have it. It's going to continue to come into the future conversations at the right time, which we have noted in the previous recommendation would be in the long-term plan review 2024-2027. I believe it would be against our usual process and in many ways against the many others in our community that have their own take, have their own causes that they're fighting for as well, who weren't able to get it onto a recommendation from this council into the long-term plan. And based on that notion, which Shirley has rightfully raised, the long-term plan is for council to decide on what the feedback from the wider community is, and we haven't had that discussion with the wider community yet, which is why I'm happy to support this amendment, because we need to bear in mind that within that Westbrook precinct, we've got cricket, we've got hockey, we've got touch, we've got rugby, every single area that is surrounding there has their own sports club, sports course, sports field, and this is part of a much wider discussion. So and thank you, Councillor Donaton, for raising that within our long-term plan document that we went out to the community, there is only that one line on the Westbrook precinct. So this discussion is a bit premature, and if this amendment is lost, I'm happy to discuss it in the recommendations too, but I see a lot of merit in staying true to the process of council and actually showing respect to the many people that have made submissions to this LTP that we didn't bring forward their submission or their recommendation, but we have already acknowledged, received and are continuing discussions on the petition. So that's just my 2 cents worth and how I'll be voting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. Well put. And as the mover, Councillor Donaldson, I'll ask Mrs. Trumper. Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. No, I don't take comments from the floor. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Trumper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the reason why I've actually lost a lot of sleep over this particular issue, because I actually feel really strongly about some of the recommendations that have been actually made and I suppose pointed out around their feelings of the land. This actually came about from an issue that was raised out of context. It did not have any, I'm going to say, detail. Is
this relevant? Your point is relevant?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. There was no detail around the discussion when it went to out into the community from this mahi document. The community meeting that Springfield called was around emotion of a change, and everybody gets emotional when there's around change, but this was a wider discussion. It needed to go out for wider discussion. I looked at those recommendatory points, and there are 2 or 3 that I didn't agree with, and I just believe that this needs to, we're going to defer it. It's not been lost. The petition is still relevant. The information that we have is still relevant, and all we are asking is that this needs a much wider debate about what is right for Rotorua, how we can actually attest to doing our job is to actually put out a full proposal and not a part proposal based on people's thinking or opinions or emotion.
Thank you, Mrs. Trumper, and also with all the relevant information contained so that people can actually be assured that they're looking at all of the information so that they can think about it and also assist us with our decision making. So, councillors, you've heard that there has been an amendment by Mrs. Trumper, seconded by Her Worship. I'll read that amendment and I'm going to put that motion, that the discussion on the future of the Springfield Golf Course be deferred until such time as a full assessment is conducted by Council on a future sports facility that is fit for purpose to meet the future needs of the Rotorua community to go out for full consultation at the appropriate time. I am going to put that motion now. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you. We'll call for a division, I think. Thank you. I'll call for a division. Please, this is a council meeting, thank you. So I'll call for all those in favour, please raise your right hand. Thank you.
Can you please just leave them up?
Sorry. No. Thank you. You've got them? Thank you very much. So the amendment is carried. Thank you. So, yes, well, Councillor Kaifong, you're recorded against. Thank you. Councillor Bentley, Councillor Kumar. Anybody missed? No, thank you. Councillors for that one. Yes, I will, thank you. I will just take... Can we please be back just after past? We'll take a quick 10 minutes break. Thank you. Thank you for the discussion, councillors. increases topic 11. Thank you, councillors. Committee members, if you can resume your seats, please. So we're on to, we're coming down to, I think, our last hour. So topic 11, I'd like a mover and a seconder, please, that the committee supports council in the delivery of the proposals set out in the consultation and in order to deliver knowledge that a 9.2% average rates increase is required in year one of the 2021-22 year, and average annual rates increases of 3.75% forecast for the following 9 years. So may I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. So I'll just open that up for discussion now. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Your Worship.
This is not easy, the penultimate roundup, really, of the 5 challenges that we took out to our community. And no one could say that at every workshop we weren't told that that's too high. That's a logical response from a community under great pressure. And no one says that our community at the moment isn't feeling the pressure of the last 2 years. That's not to undermine the aspiration on the individual challenges that we did, and I want to thank councillors for the healthy debate that we've had on those challenges. I'd have to say that 9.2% doesn't sit easily with any of us, but we realise that in order to do everything that we need to do, especially in the infrastructure challenge, and also the economic development to keep the community alive and their hopes alive about future growth aspirations and getting people here, we almost grudgingly accept that this is the right reflection of the rates, and not many people took much interest about it being reduced down to 3.75 in the following years. They were sort of hit in the pocket. I never forget those that did turn up to our meetings who genuinely are feeling hardship, and I believe the communication on this, if we vote this in support of this resolution today, and I can't see any other option, our communications are going to be important about taking up the option of relief for the senior citizens, the co-payment options that we have to work through yet with Tarawera and others are still kept alive. I believe this is really wise stewardship. It's not profligate spending. The investment has been very, very carefully targeted. It's not about projects that I get hit with every day, especially on social media, about vanity. This is about pride in our place, pride in our people and our environment. And I really believe that we did the right thing to complete the projects that we started. There's nothing worse than seeing countries in the global recession, and I visit a lot of Asian countries after the recession to see buildings hollowed out and nothing being done about them. And with the hollowing out about that development came the hollowing out about people's hope. So we had to keep going on those projects that we really believed in, and they are actually going to be beacons to Wharetanga when we can get that through its challenges. Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre, the cycling, which has been gold to us during post-COVID, and the ones that we've followed on with today. The Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre really careful that you keep sense of pride in our community, so that we have a sense of place. And certainly, for all some are criticising that people are going to leave Rotorua in droves, I believe once they see that we've got the housing plan, we've got the community safety plan, they know that we've got natural assets and a people with hope and ambition, and that this is a fantastic community to come and locate to for your children, your families, and particularly our sense of pride about being bicultural, heartland of New Zealand. So it's difficult, but I fully support this recommendation. We had some cute ideas in the past at an LTP. Just top slice 1% off the top and bring that back to us and tell it what it looks like. You can cut and slice the cake whichever way you like. Thomas can artfully take 1% off the top, but it's about us making political decisions about what we've decided that can no longer happen. It's as simple as that. And I believe the sum of the parts of the 5 challenges that we took out are absolutely critical to keep the wheels turning on the future of this place. So I am fully in support of this recommendation. And you always say a but. I urge councillors to look around us, look at the wider region, look at those other areas that are finding the infrastructure challenges and investment absolutely astronomical. Look at the rates that they've had to know that as responsible elected members they've had to approve in order to get baseline infrastructure spending done to actually help with growth. So I support this. I support it, and I hope our community understands the responsibility we as elected members have to make these tough decisions on behalf of our community. That's all.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm taking some more questions. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Support tautoko, everything that the Mayor's just said, and also some of the projects in here, we had to make some bold decisions, and we have. I think the community, when we were meeting them here, understood, but I think most of the ones I ended up talking to, they said, yes, they accept that, but if the money goes up, use it on infrastructure, and a lot of the projects are there. I'd like to thank here and put it on the record. I did, after our meeting last night, thank Una for what I thought was a very good, well put together agenda, so we could look at these. In the past, I can remember some LTPs were all over the place and everything, but these were very well organised for us to understand what's going on. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Look, I agree with the Mayor. We have to support this, and 9.2% is high, but I don't see an alternative. I think that, we've already seen in our discussion around infrastructure that over half this rates rise and half this money is going towards infrastructure. And if we do not spend on that infrastructure in future years, the increase in rates will be double that. And we can see that in other cities where they have not been maintaining or improving or replacing infrastructure. I would like to point out that once again for rural residential, the average is around 15%, not 9.2%. And I think that with the possibility of 1 year, this is about the 9th year straight, that the increase for rural residential has been around the highest increase out of all sectors. So I do ask that we can look towards reducing that burden that continually falls on rural residential. But I think we've seen through comments made in the community hui that we held that actually the ratepayers in our areas were supportive of things that were of benefit to the whole community. They were supportive of their rates going towards the Aquatic Centre. They're supportive of their rates going into infrastructure that supports the whole of Rotorua. I am a little worried to see the mention of the 3.5% forecast for the following 9 years. And that is really because we always have that low forecast for the years stretching out. But that's assuming that we don't continue to develop and improve our city. And that is the thing that we can not do. We can't stop improving and developing our city, because it is the improvement and developing of the city that makes it the place it is to live. So other than, you know, so I do find that a little difficult comment in there, because I think it does send a wrong message, possibly, that rates will drop in the future. And the reality is that things keep coming up and hitting us, whether they're earthquakes, whether they're climate change, whether it's the Three Waters proposals. These things come along, and we need to allow for them. But so I am supportive of this, you know, slightly reluctantly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be in support. It's never easy to confront a 9.2% rate rise in the first year, but I remind colleagues that in the current year we had, and with the advent of the pandemic, we implemented a 0% general rate and a 4% targeted rate at the last annual plan. That, of course, caused some of the, I guess, the frightening effects for, or in response to the feedback coming from rural residential, who are facing as an average 15% this year. Some of them actually got a 0.9% overall rate rise at the last annual plan. So, and I also want to acknowledge the belt tightening that was done within the organisation at the last annual plan, and the wage freeze put across the organisation. So, you know, we haven't been, you know, spending willy-nilly. This is an investment in our district, which sits within a region that is leading GDP growth across the country, and we have to invest for the future. We see our fellow neighbouring TLAs who are looking at substantial rises of greater than what we're voting on here today. I think we also need to acknowledge the level of subsidies that we've been able to attract from both the Regional Council and from central government, which is making a significant contribution to growing our place. And I congratulate Her Worship and Chief Executive on all the work that's been done in working with central government and aligning with central government in not going down the austerity route, but investing for the future and to build back better. So I'll be supporting the recommendation here, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This 9.2% is beyond the ability for many of our folk, especially those that are on benefits, of course, but also talking superann. The job of this council should always be to look after infrastructure first and last and foremost. And the history of this council is not all that great with regard to responsible spending. You know, I remind you of Mudtopia and the Green Corridor.
Madam Chair, I just don't feel that that's appropriate, dragging Mudtopia into the conversation.
No, I'm happy to. He's putting it in the context of how he sees the rates being applied. So thank you. I'm happy for that. Thank you, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The other things that we have done wrong, I believe, that these people, they have long memories, and they see that in their eyes that we've been acting irresponsibly with some of our projects. And a lot of these people that are paying rates, they're never going to use a bombing pool. They're never going to use a water slide. I don't want to be there to watch it then. So I think that we've got to try and pare back something.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to be supporting this. I think you may as well call me Noka Kumar in the future. Our rates are already too high, and to further burden our aged and grey power community with a huge whack like this is now not showing responsibility to the very difficult times ahead. I guess I meet a very different community than most of you out here, and everyone that I've met, no one has mentioned that they will support it. Last week in a meeting at Mamaku, both groups, Progress Mamaku and suggested that they wanted to boycott the increase. They said, and I quote, is what Progress Mamaku said, that over 2 LTPs, nothing has been achieved for them, and they have gone back to their notes to say that it is very disheartening for them to see it. Rates are not going to drop, but in a different climate than now, I may hear a different message from the community. And while it's hard and infrastructure needs to be built, there are lots of projects that could be stalled or could wait the time of tide. Currently, 9.2% is going to really cripple a lot of people, and so that's no reason to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. Other councillor? Yes, Mrs. Trumper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought everybody would have been having a go around this. So let's just remind a few people about where we're at. Years and years of no asset management by previous councils. This council is now facing the end of asset management life. Nobody pre this council has actually had an asset management plan, to my understanding. Happy to be proven wrong. We ended up with the lakefront and the Waka development, and I must admit that the Rural Board did not support the Waka development. It's gone ahead. And this was all pre-COVID. Nothing that could be absolutely challenged over that. And I've got grandchildren that loved the lakefront, and yet my daughter-in-law did not take her children to the park because they wanted to go to the water, which meant they were running across the road. So the development at the lakefront is essential for anybody that has young children and wants them safe and removed from traffic. We ended up then having earthquakes around the Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre, and the museum issues around significant, I suppose I'm going to say, asbestos issues. Now that was very expensive. They're heritage buildings and they are significant. Now they could have been closed up and just left to become derelict buildings. Now that this council has chosen to earthquake-proof them, and that is being true leaders, making sure that our buildings that are of heritage standing actually get repaired and actually make them better for the fit for the future. We've already passed the infrastructure, we've passed the Aquatic Centre, the rate rise is inevitable. And I am going to say that this is the first time that rural pastoral does not face a significant rate rise. Because I remember a meeting on a Queen's Birthday Monday where Her Worship, the CE and the CFO came out to Wātapu, and they faced a very hostile crowd. Now, that was over a significant rate rise, and we did not like it. But the benefits to all of our community in stormwater management and getting these asset maintenance plans done is absolutely critical going forward for councils. Otherwise, they'd be derelict in their duty. So anybody that has made a comment in their submission about when I was this person and I did this and I didn't have these issues, no, they didn't. We're in a different world and a different time and a different place. We have to face climate change, ailing asset. You know, it's just incredible that this council has been lumbered with this particular noose, for want of a better description. You live in a town or city, you must meet those costs. And I do not believe, contrary to some, that the rates are very significant when you see that there are rates going up by 19% in some. And if you live down in Otago, it is 80% for their regional council. So, you know, farmers are facing rising regional council rates to meet biodiversity, biosecurity, etc. So you need to be aware that there are significant challenges being faced by every council, and we're just sadly around the table to make these really tough decisions. On that note, the hardship rebates, the rates rebates, are actually available to anybody that meets the eligibility criteria. And I would like to encourage council staff to ensure that these letters go out with the rates notices so that people can actually see whether they are, and making sure that the people in both Phil's area, Mr. Thomas's area, and my area that meet those criteria actually apply. And I just want to also suggest that there are some other submissions around business rates and how targeted rates could be better apportioned around Airbnb and home-based businesses that are currently just paying a residential rate. And we also, oh no, better not go in there, I'll get into trouble. So in final, I have to support this rate rise because we need to get on with actually making our city a far better place for our community.
Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Yes, Mr. Bissini, Tule.
Yeah, kia ora, Madam Chair. This is an issue that's quite personal. People come up to me and ask, bro, what's up with the 15% increase? And then as we start talking, then they want a better city, a safer city. They want bomb pools, they want lakefront, they want redwoods. And I'm forced to say, Kazi, who's going to pay for that? And that's because none of them. I can just say I failed school C math. That's why we leave it to the experts. But I know that the harm, everything is expensive right now. The cost of living is going up. And so most of these concerns come from a genuine place. And at the same time, we have a job to do. We have to make sure that we're governing our city with the best we can, with the best resources we have. We don't just chuck it everywhere. We try and put on focus places. But if we communicate better with those who are in need, I think that would be a great start. But we still have to pay for all of the plans for the future. So I support, sorry, Kazis, I support the rate increase. But I think with better communication and greater compassion for those who can't, then that so long as we get good bang for the buck and valuable services, no one will begrudge that. But if we're not communicating that, then I'm going to get more questions.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Yates, then Councillor Wang.
Kia ora, and thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. E ri tēnā hau ki a koe putaua and all the Kazis approaching me. Some of them actually said, I vote Yates for better rates. Well, I'm sorry. It does come down to the weighing fact of what does this actually look like. And over the last couple of days, we've also deliberated about the importance that a navigator would mean in someone's life when they're looking at building or developing land. We're looking at other opportunities to make these services more meaningful, so that we are providing our community with greater, whilst they have expectations, that we live up to their expectations too. We've been bombarded, as I'm sure many of the councillors have as well, other than just the submissions. We've also had emails requesting a rates reprieve, but I'd also like to acknowledge Mrs Trumper and the mention of the hardship grants, as well as the relief that some of our whānau can be entitled to. And I would like to see more communication around that actually going out, not only through letters, but if there could be something more put up on our website. And I do ask that our fellow councillors also put that up on your social media streams as well, because the more people are informed about how they can be assisted with the payments of their rates, the easier the burden does become. And whilst 9.2 is a huge ask from our community, we are so in need of it right now. Infrastructure is just but one point, and I do like the point, and whilst Councillor Bentley might not like to see our mayor coming down a hydro slide, I use the pools and I'm at the Aquatics every week with my son Temanaya, and I know that when that place is humming, I walk straight past those changing rooms and it's an eyesore as far as I'm concerned. But I'm down there every week, and so investments like this into the future are critical, and it's also about ensuring that we are making mokopuna decisions. So I support the increase.
Thank you. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to say this document, it's titled the long-term plan because we're making long-term decisions, and we can't afford to be making short-sighted decisions. I don't want to leave the council in 20, 30, 40 years' time, or indeed our community in 20, 30, 40 years' time, in the same situation that we are facing now, where we have an infrastructure network that is at its end of its asset life. This document, and I'd just like to say I do support this recommendation. It's about investing in our homes and thriving communities, and actually this whole document, all its points relate to a thriving community. The Aquatic Centre, well, firstly I'd just like to say that I'll be using those facilities, and I know for a fact many adults I have talked to have said that they would be using that facility. Their children, their grandchildren, their mokopuna, they'll be using that facility. Community safety, a massive issue that we are facing here in Rotorua as well. That's important, that's included. Economic development as well. We are in a new environment now, and we need to build back better, and economic development is at the forefront of that. Climate action as well. We're investing in climate action. And again, I mentioned infrastructure because as we see around the country, infrastructure has been lagging, and it's been lagging for decades, but we're now facing a solution on whether or not we act on it, and we are acting on it with our 30-year infrastructure strategy. But I'd just like to thank my colleague, again, Mrs Trumper, for talking about the rates rebate scheme through the Department of Internal Affairs, and you can go onto the website, and I will, as Councillor Yates mentioned as well, circulate it on my social media channels, the rates rebate calculator, which you could get rebated up to $655. But coming down to this, and I know the Mayor of Lower Hutt and also the MP Chris Bishop, when their new wharf was opened, they went and jumped off the wharf in the celebrations, and I can say that when our lakefront is open, I'll do the same. In the end, I do want to say that, again, we are making these decisions for our future generations. And I have to say, in the past, those decisions were pretty short-sighted, and that's why we are faced with the problems that we are faced with now. Long-term plan means decisions for the long term, and I'm glad that I'm at the table now to be making decisions for our mokopuna and for our future generations in mind. So thank you, Madam Chair. We'll be in support.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Councillor Tapsell and then Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Look, I really want to acknowledge the 780 individuals and groups that were part of the feedback to this document. We wouldn't be able to make these decisions and be as well informed without the voice of our community. That's what we're here for. But I also want to acknowledge how hard our staff have actually worked for our community. We have asked them to do more for less in a way that this organisation has never seen before. When we took on the 4 wellbeings, our core responsibilities expanded beyond just infrastructure. So when we're facing crisis like a housing issue, on top of an infrastructure issue, on top of an economic issue, we really are working a lean organisation here. And I want to acknowledge that it hasn't been easy, but we are doing it the right way because we're doing it in a way that is best for our community and our district as a whole. I also want to acknowledge that, you know, this increase is very reasonable when you look at the challenges that other councils across the country are facing. Huge increases in their rates, and we have tried to find every way possible to keep this affordable for our community. It isn't easy, and it has come with double-edged swords, like the increase of the value of properties has been a huge double-edged sword for those people who not only received an increase in the value of property, but later found out that that also results in an increase of rates. And I also want to remind the community, you know, as has been mentioned, the museum in itself coming at a cost of $55 million. These are issues that we never saw coming. They were natural hazards. It happened to us, and we had to innovate very quickly in order to still provide a service for our community and to bring that back as quickly as possible. I'm really excited to see investments to the Aquatic Centre. We've had great feedback already on the forest. We've had lots of locals having sneak peeks at the lakefront. I'm looking forward to see you bombing off that fisher, but you might have to stand up as soon as you get in. And I'm very much looking forward to the mayor come down a hydro slide at some stage. So I do really I wanted to take that time though to thank the staff and this organisation because it really hasn't been easy. Thank you to our Lakes and our Rural Community Board members and of course our Te Tato Community Board members. I'm quite proud of the way that we make the decisions here at Rotorua. We've been complimented in the past on being the most diverse council, and I actually think that from the feedback and the many local government New Zealand awards that we have won, we have been a very innovative council as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing this progress over this next 10 years of this long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. Councillor Kai Fong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I've listened carefully to what my fellow councillors have said, the feedback that's been submitted and the consultation that we've had with the public, and it isn't really an easy decision. And as I sit here even now, I'm kind of, you know, you still have these thoughts, am I on this side of the line or that side of the line? But I think that, you know, we are here looking for the best for the Rotorua community for today and for tomorrow. So we're not always looking forward to tomorrow. And so, you know, we probably need to bite the bullet, take the rates increase. We have had a one-year hiatus, if you want to call it that, in terms of a rates rise, which was offered during the COVID-19 sort of recovery. We've tried to address some inequality issues with the difference in the UAGC. We've also tried to address some of the other inequalities by moving towards a user pays system or for more recovery of those that use the services from council. In terms of both today and tomorrow, infrastructure is really, really important. And if we look at where we are at with our housing, we're not going to make any significant progress unless we have that major investment into infrastructure. So I think that, you know, a lot of the feedback was negative about councils under-investing in infrastructure, and we are trying to address that. So I think that that's really important, that we are moving ahead with such a significant sum of money being invested into infrastructure. Insofar as that decision about, well, if we don't do this rates increase, then what gives? So if you look at the long-term plan and the projects that are there, infrastructure is a significant one, and I don't think that that's something that anyone would argue about that we should put to one side. So big tick for infrastructure. If you look at the other projects that are there, a lot of them have already commenced, and I don't think we want a half-finished museum or lakefront or Sir Howard Morrison Centre, so we really need to finish the work that we've already started. In terms of the aquatic centre, yes, there have been some jokes around bombing pools and, would I use this or would I not use that? But I think we need to look at the fact that we want a better Rotorua for all of us, and whether or not we use that facility, it's something for the community. And I was a kid and I stood outside Decca selling raffle tickets when my father was raising money to build the aquatic centre, and we had a car on the back of a truck selling raffle tickets so we could help pay for that facility. And that's a long time ago, but nothing's happened to that facility since, so I think it probably is time for a bit of an upgrade. Lastly, on community safety, I think that we've heard all the bad news around the homelessness, the problems that have come with crime, and I was in support yesterday of actually increasing the amount of funding into community safety, because that is an issue for today. And if there was anything that I would have wanted out of this rates rise, would have been, could we have spent some more in that area? But I think really what I'm coming down to is that if we don't spend the money now, then we're not going to improve Rotorua. We could stagnate, and none of us wants that. So I think that the ultimate answer comes down to the rates rise is probably something that we would need to accept. So I would vote in favour of the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai-Fong. Thank you. Well, I'll just perhaps say that I'd like to, obviously I'm going to support the recommendation. It takes me back to 10 years ago when I came onto council, and at that time there were 4 councillors who had been here for 30 years plus. And I think actually that some of the decisions that were made at the time actually were a reflection of possibly the time that they'd been here, and also the fact that some of them were getting on in years. Because I think when I look around now our table and I see young faces, and I think if you have young parents sitting at the table, then they see things through a different lens. They see things they're future focused. They recognise that there are issues right now that have to be tackled, but they actually are looking to the future for themselves and for their children as well. We're all ratepayers. The majority of us here are ratepayers, and we know that we have, from one end of the spectrum to the other, we've got senior citizens, we've got young people, first homeowners, and we've got those parents who have got children going into college and all the expenses that come with that. And so we don't want to burden them with any unnecessary rate increase, but certainly we can't afford to close up shop and then think, well, in a couple of years' time we'll wake up and then we'll crank ourselves up again. We just cannot do that. We just can't do that. But leadership is not a popularity contest. I've said that before, and this is really what it comes down to. I mean, we've heard the voices of people that had in the past never used to get heard here in council. And so because of our networks and our links in the community, we hear those voices now, and they do look to us to make sure that their issues and their concerns are given the same weight of consideration as everyone else's. Because this is not just a certain few get their voices heard and then the others get, just seen as being of no value. Everybody is of value. And so those voices that in the past were not heard are heard now, because we've got the mix of community sitting around this table, and so I think that's really quite important. But it's not leadership is not a popularity contest, and when it's time to step up and do the right thing, and in this instance I think we have to do it, and we will do it, I believe, we do it because it is the right thing to do. And this is not the time to, as I said, close up shop, crank it up again in 2 or 3 years. That is not what our community expects of us. So I will certainly be supporting the recommendation. Your Worship, if you'd like to...
It's just a couple of comments, and I've really enjoyed the reflections and the indications across from colleagues today. And it reminds me, I've heard comments about the line. What side of the line are you on? This isn't a line. This is about us doing the right thing for our people at this right time and making the balanced decisions for as those said, our mokopuna and their future. Sort of rather saddens me about some of the issues brought to the table, but we'll ignore those. And some of the big issues that we have supported today, I'll take the Aquatic Centre, for example, the option that we supported today is actually 16 cents a week we voted for. So while we always look at 9.2%, it seems a lot. Across the board, you can't say it for across the board because it has a different impact on rural as it does to urban residential and business. But if you represented it in dollars, the impact, and it is called a burden, no tax is anything other than a burden, the impact is not that significant if the investment is made in the right place. And I'm really confident here that we have invested in the right place. I think those that have also commented about the money that we have attracted from government, our rates would be hugely higher if we hadn't got over a couple of $100 million in terms of the Provincial Growth Fund, roading, infrastructure, lakes infrastructure subsidies. And that has been because you work on the partnerships with whomever is in government. And we've done that, and I congratulate the staff that have actually attracted and earned that money. So this is very significant today. It's significant who's participated. It's significant in who went out to every public hui. And we know who was there to listen to our community, with the staff that sometimes outnumbered us. But they were there doing the work because they showed that this is important to us. And very good process, Una and Jeff, has resulted in not a bitter discussion today, but a discussion focused on the future, because we all understand that responsibility as elected members. I've been slightly saddened by those that think that they are, by saying keeping the rates down, is going to win a vote. That doesn't win in the end. I've been in politics for long enough to know it's about doing the right thing, not scratching the itch of the people that you think are your supporters. We are here for the whole of the community, and we have to make that decision. People know when they're looking in the future at who they're going to support to sit at this table, they're going to look at those that participated at council meetings, that participated in workshops, that participated in the forums that we went out and walked beside our staff and listened and helped get the views from our community. And I like the process. We heard from many, many more people than those years that we invited submissions and sat here for 3 days and every submitter came to the table and had, was it 10 minutes or 6? 5 minutes. No time for questions and on to the next one. Now, some questioned at our first workshop here in this room, can we speak please before we start the process? That was the paradigm of the old way of doing governance and listening to your community and actually being able to capture it. It's been an amazing amount of work. I've loved the document, I've loved what we've taken out, the collateral, felt smart. Didn't wear the T-shirt that often, but it was good. The branding in the community, you know, I think we'll have a debrief after this and say, because of the result, would we do anything differently in the next LTP? I bet there will be things that we say we'd change up. But overall, I'm really satisfied that we've listened to our community. They've participated in big numbers in different forum and some online because they don't like forum. So we've done the best we can to hear the views of the community, and I believe the balanced decisions made today are responsible decisions, and I'm proud to lead a council whose majority views have supported the direction of travel that we're undertaking for our future.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. Well, I am going to, it's been moved and seconded, thank you, moved by Councillor Mayor Chadwick, seconded by Councillor Maxwell, that the committee supports Council in the delivery of the proposal set out in the consultation and in order to delivery, hang on, in order to, in order to delivery, acknowledge that a 9.2% average rates increase is required in year 1, 2021 to 22, and average annual rates increases of 3.75% forecast for the following 9 years. Has been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Sorry.
Just a question, a spelling mistake in deliver instead of
yes,
delivery.
Yes, exactly. That's what threw me. Thank you. Deliver. So I'll put that again. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Thank you. So, I think there was two. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we do have one further topic, which is just some of the other feedback. So thank you, Una.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'll just do a very quick introduction to this. So, as has already been discussed, there's been a huge amount of community feedback, and the community do take the opportunity in the long-term plan process to provide feedback outside some of those topics that you have specifically gone out to talk to. One of the jobs that the team then undertakes is to go through all of that feedback and provide back to you some clustering of those topics and themes for you to give acknowledgement of those and consideration of where that feedback goes. Quite often the community may feel that they will submit into an LTP and aren't sure where that ends up. So what we've got here is a series of additional feedback outside of those topics that were your main consultation topics, and have been presented to you in a way that kind of clusters the themes or the requests together, with some recommendations from the staff that those comments and suggestions are received, and in most cases they are then forwarded on to the various business units to be included in either business as usual practices or in many cases further consultation or feedback into proposals and plans that are being worked on. So to give effect to that, we've got, and it was circulated to you as a separate document, and we just need to spend some time going through those to acknowledge them, receive them, and to make a decision on them. So if Go Marty, you could bring the first one up. Oh, she's got it up there, wonderful.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'll just do a really brief intro on each one. So the first cluster of feedback that we received was around community hubs. And this was quite interesting to get that feedback, which was referring to comments made within the consultation document about further looking at community hubs. So happy to take any questions there, and again this is one where we're suggesting that those requests for, I guess, ongoing work and consideration around community hubs and how these might actually fit in with the overall housing and thriving community strategy. So I think what we're seeing here is many people wanting to be involved in further conversations around the concept of community hubs.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Well, I think it's a wonderful idea, but I wouldn't just link it to housing. Hubs in the future should, in my view, with the reforms in the health sector, start to link up with where access to health services at the most important community level, and then you wrap services around them. So where housing is going to be in the future in the rural or lakes community, we also ought to consider the networks of roading and access to other services that you need in a housing project. So they are linked to a housing plan, but don't forget the wider implication of other services.
Yes. Thank you. Because I think we've got about 12 of these to get through, and I would like to make sure that we can finish pretty much on time. I don't think these have had any significant impact financially, do they? So I don't propose to go around the table 27 times or whatever. No. So if we can just keep it, please. If you've got something to say that's supporting of it and a different view, then that's fine. But I am going to move quite swiftly ahead through these 12. Thank you. Mrs. Trumper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would like to acknowledge that there are actually quite a few lakes and rural comments in here, and I think when I look at it, I would really like to ensure that the community boards are included in some of these conversations, just to take feedback out to our own communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. I also noted in a lot of the feedback there was a concern around community safety and community hubs also being a part of that, and obviously some confusion from the community, but around safety in terms of policing, so whether we could work alongside not only health organisations but also the police, as we no longer have the community, I can't remember what they're called, but they used to have the community constables as well in the hubs in Western Heights, etc. So we'll loop them into the conversation, please.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Just a quick one, Madam Chair, and it's that top bullet point there in the submission from Waikato, South Waikato Council about co-funding for the Ate Muri Hall.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy with the policy as it stands. We provide a lot of boat ramps, forest trails, etc., that others around the Bay of Plenty enjoy, and we don't ask neighbouring TLAs for funding for those. So I just make that comment.
Thank you.
Happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Wang. Thank you. I'm going to put that motion that the committee notes the feedback, that the council notes the request for community hubs and considers these within the Housing and Thriving Communities strategy. So all those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried.
Moving on, the next clustering of feedback was from residents in Ngāpuna, and I think is reflective of the issues of late. So again, just recognising this and that the infrastructure unit, of course, are well aware of these and are working with the community.
Bishop. Thank you, Councillor Yates. Thank you. I'll put that recommendation. That the committee note the feedback, that the committee refers the feedback to the infrastructure business unit to be incorporated where possible. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried.
The next cluster here is around conversations, I guess, that do come into council relatively regularly around those connectivity issues, the internet access to that. And the recommendation there is that council continues to advocate and work with partners looking at options to address those connectivity issues across the Rotorua district. So again, an ongoing piece of work that is always at the forefront of work that this council undertakes.
I'd like to move this.
Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yes, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'd just like to make a really quick comment on this, because these are the sorts of things that fall fair and squarely in the laps of the community boards. And I actually live in an area where we lose power on a regular basis, and when we lose power, we lose internet and we lose phones. And in terms of the Lakes Community Board, I'm in conversations with Chorus and with the Rural Broadband Rollout team, trying to ensure access for our communities. We're also facilitating going out into each communities and building civil defence plans for the local communities to involve and cover for these things. So one issue that's really important to our communities is people on home dialysis if there are power cuts. So, you know, we are working towards trying to help our communities and thinking a bit laterally around these. So we do work on these issues.
Thank you. Councillor Yates.
Kia ora, and thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. I wanted to pick up also on the point of whether or not it could be a possibility for civil defence also to encapsulate, as well as utilisation and better utilisation for our marae and community halls that are also out there as being points within our community that should have good connection and are also part of our community.
Thank you. Mrs. Trumper, you wanted to add?
Thank you. I just really wanted to pick up on a point about power, and one of the communities that doesn't have a relay that is able to be connected. And Unison promised about 3 years ago that they would actually put in a generator, because we were without power for 3 days, and it meant that people were losing stock because they couldn't be milked. And these are the sorts of things that our communities suffer from, power cuts, and it is also fitting in with connectivity around internet, etc.
Thank you. We've had a mover and a seconder that the committee note the feedback, that the council continues to advocate and work with partners to look into options to address connectivity issues across the Rotorua district. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried.
Okay, the next series of feedback was from the Mamaku residents, and a lot of this councillors would have received firsthand in the face-to-face session with Mamaku. These ones here are requests that can be put through to the Operations Business Unit, but they're also being taken up by the Rural Community Board and are being further discussed there. And Shirley looks like she's got something to add.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Trumper.
Am I able to move this?
So I was just happy to move this and then speak to it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Trumper.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. And I saw Councillor Kumar. All right, thank you. Thank you. Yes, do you want to comment on that one, or we're just going to...
I do. I'm really happy because the Community Board we've picked up, we've been working with the Mamaku Residents Association and residents for a number of years, and to actually have this support from the LTP meeting to actually make recommendations to the appropriate sectors of council, which we are in the process of doing right now.
Thank you. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I'd also like to thank the residents of Mamaku who turned out to our LTP community consultation out there. And it was a really big turnout, and we heard from a range of views, and it was really appreciated. I'd also like to thank the work that the Rural Community Board is doing in Mamaku, and having been there on Sunday morning to present some awards to the school, to the kids at the school, and you saw the turnout at the school for the event, you can tell that the rural schools are very much at the centre of a community. And to invest in, and I know the Rural Community Board has provided funding for certain projects, and in Mamaku especially, they were so appreciative of the support that they've had.
Thank you. I am going to put that motion, that the committee note the feedback, that the committee refers the feedback to the Operations Business Unit to be incorporated where possible. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried.
So this cluster of feedback here recognises and reflects upon conversations that you have already had over the last couple of days when you've talked about those barriers to enabling housing. And there had been, quite a bit of feedback around navigators and the ways to make the consenting process easier for anybody wishing to undertake that. So again, noting that this feedback is received, and also that the feedback and everything, along with what you have discussed yourselves today, is passed through to the Operations Business Unit.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. Capsule. Thank you. I'm going to put that motion. There. Oh, you want to speak to it? Yes. Thank you. Councillor Kumar and Councillor Bentley too, is that right?
No, I just wanted to turn the mic on.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm in support of this, but just want to understand a little bit more clarification. Requested an in-house council staff member, ideally with a Maori heart. Just need some clarity around that. Is it because someone that would understand how the system works, or I thought we do consultations with iwis anyway?
Just for clarity, the wording up there isn't the staff's interpretation. That is the verbatim of the feedback that came through. So that's entirely up for you as councillors to decipher what you feel the meaning of that in is. I guess the crux of the request is for a navigator or for staff to assist people through the whole consenting process.
That's right, and usually that if you're talking about someone who has knowledge of Māori land, who has knowledge of where the various iwi are for a start, hopefully they can pronounce the iwi you know, the iwi name properly as well. So all of those sort of things. So because if you're coming in and you want to talk to somebody about your land or a housing issue, then you'd like to think that someone would know actually what you're talking about and where you're talking about. So yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You've hit the nail on the head, actually, but this was a comment made out at Te Takinga Marae at Mauria by a lady from the Whangamarina School, actually, who acknowledged that there are, and this is where we don't fully understand our homeless issues or our housing issues in this district, is that there are a large number of whānau returning to live on whānau land. And it's Maori land, and they just want to pop up a lean-to or a granny flat or some sort of construction, but and so it's getting navigated through the consenting process, and it sort of takes me back to another comment in here, Madam Chair, if you'll permit me, and that Mamaku residents think it's unfair they pay water rates when those who live in town don't pay for water. And so I think we've got some work to do around our comms about perceptions that are out there, and just to clarify some of these issues. Thank you.
Councillor Yates.
Kia ora, and just following on from Councillor Donaldson, it actually came up at all 7 of our face-to-face meetings, the want or the desire for a navigator of some shape or form to assist whānau who were perplexed with having to navigate themselves our own consenting process, especially around wanting to develop papakainga, and especially now that we're about to start looking at consents shifting and land use also shifting whilst we have a housing problem. So it was really to Raj, Councillor Kumar, just to also, you'd understand it, I hope, and that it was just finding someone who could actually work more and be that one person, that conduit to pull all the network together, because it can be quite tiresome and daunting at times to even get through the first step. So in essence, whilst it was a verbatim in this from our meeting out at Te Takinga, every single one of our face-to-face meetings, we came across an individual or a whānau member who requested a similar type of person.
Thank you. I'm going to put that motion now, because it's been moved and seconded that the committee note the feedback, that the committee refers the feedback to the Operations Business Unit. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried.
Our next clustering of feedback are around roading and footpath issues. The feedback in this area is coming strongly through from the Rural and the Lakes Community Board. So both of those community boards are picking these up and are working with largely the infrastructure unit and maybe in some cases the ops team on how these could be progressed or prioritised or the likes there.
Mr. Thomas? Thank you.
I'm happy to move this and have a brief comment as well.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Happy to take your comments.
Yeah, I would just like to say that this is another thing that I think falls to community boards. We're sort of a catch-all for these sorts of things. They're not really council responsibilities along our state highways, but we spend a lot of time trying to facilitate the process with NZTA. We've had great success in establishing a shared pathway between Okiri Falls and Moria in recent years, which is being built this year. But it is an ongoing request from our communities, and it comes back to that community safety issue for those communities, that it is safe for people to move around their communities, not just in a car.
Thank you. Well, I'll put that motion that the committee note the feedback, that the committee refers the feedback to the Infrastructure Business Unit to be incorporated where possible. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. How are we going, Una? Can I just ask?
We've got about another 10 clusters to go through.
Are they about this? Oh, these are the clusters.
Yep.
Thank you. I think we're probably going to get there.
Cool.
Thank you.
So the next grouping or major sort of themes of feedback is around public space. These are all comments, issues, requests that can be referred back through to the operations business unit and can be incorporated into further work around community hubs or the work around locality planning and the likes. So.
Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. Thank you, Your Worship. Any comments or feedback? It does speak for itself, yes. So I'll put, thank you, that the committee note the feedback and that the committee refers the feedback to the operations business unit to be incorporated where possible. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you, carried.
And the next one, just some requests and suggestions around considerations for Three Waters. So again, this will be referred through to the infrastructure business unit to incorporate into ongoing work in this space.
That's something that we're already working on right now. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Yates. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
As you've noted, Madam Chair, the Puringa reference group is underway, and that is incorporates members of Mana Whenua Iwi, Te Aroha Lakes Trust, Rotorua Lakes Council, and CNI. So that's trucking along and starting to get better understanding on all of these issues.
Thank you. That is a biggie. Yes, Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. It wasn't appropriate to bring up in the LTP discussion, but on the Three Waters, if we could please also look at a submission that was received to investigate a reduced targeted sewage rate for community groups, not for profits or Midai. And this is just that situation where, just like schools, some groups have a lot of pans, a lot of toilets, but are charged at perhaps a commercial rate when they do operate as a not-for-profit. So if that could also be incorporated into that.
Be included. Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. I'll put that, there we are, that the committee note the feedback, that the committee refers the feedback to the infrastructure business unit to be incorporated where possible. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried.
Our next grouping of feedback is around support for the elderly age group, just noting there the increasingly high proportion of Rotorua's population. There was some good feedback in the face-to-face sessions around how our elderly community can be more involved, and there has been a request for financial assistance ongoing to Parkside. Not part of the overall LTP process, but this request will be taken on board within the organisation and referred through to the operations team.
Thank you. I'm happy to move that one. Oh, thank you. I'm happy to move that one. Thank you. And I just wanted to say that obviously, you know, with the increase in elderly population all around the country, there's going to be some significant issues, and it's around mobility, it's around everything, housing, particularly housing. So it's good that we've got that there. So thank you. I'll note that the committee note the feedback, that the committee refers the feedback to the operations business unit to be incorporated where possible. All those in favour, please. Oh yes, please, Councillor.
It's a quick question. Could I ask you, I think REC does support Parkside. They're asking us for funding, but really REC does support them.
Oh yes, and so yes, certainly the Rotorua Energy Trust does support them. Yes, yes, that's right. Thank you. So I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Oh, sorry, Your Worship. Thank you.
The next section of feedback is around public transport. So just some comments there around the services and the likes, and we have, there has been discussion about that in our conversations over the last couple of days. So just some things, I guess, to consider when we're working with Regional Council in terms of the overall public transport system. So again, just noting that feedback and that the committee refers this to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council and those public transport committees.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Yates. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Thank you. Did you want to speak to them? Would someone like to speak to that? It's Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And look, I would love to see a water taxi going around Lake Rotorua. If Wellington can have them in their rough seas, we can have them in Rotorua. And hopefully, if and when the tourists return, it will become a viable option. I know from being on those on the Regional Public Transport Committee, I know the costs of a water taxi compared to bus services and stuff like that. So I think it will fall on a private company to want to do it. But I always enjoy taking issues to the Regional Public Transport Committee, and I'll enjoy raising this one.
Thank you. Councillor Yates.
And likewise, I know that it's been mentioned in at least 2 of the boards that I sit on with schools around the possibility of having water taxis. We've already got a great service on our jewel, which is Tarawera. They service a water taxi, and if you look more around the Motu, there are lots of water service taxis that provide equitable and affordable transport across waterways. So I think that would be great. Kia ora.
Final comment, Councillor Donaldson.
Just to note, Madam Chair, that the Rotorua Public Transport Review has been elevated up the list of projects on the Regional Land Transport Plan, which deliberations are coming up on very shortly, but good work there by Mr Thomas and Councillor Thurston, who are on that committee, and our staff in the infrastructure team and Stavros's RAG group. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put that motion that the committee note the feedback and that the committee refer this request to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried.
The next grouping of feedback is around some comments and suggestions for inclusion, I suppose, by the finance team. So these ones are around looking at new rates around Airbnb, which have been ongoing conversations within council, and also remembering that the consultation document did talk to the possibility of introducing a development contributions policy, and that if it does get to the point of policy, will go through its own separate consultation process as well. So again, comments in here from ratepayers and submitters to be referred through to the CFO.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kaifong. You're moving that.
I just wanted to have some questions around this first, because I think that this one is a little bit more than just simply referring it to the business unit to be incorporated where possible. We're talking, there are financial considerations here, I think. So I think it's more than just simply incorporating it. I think we need to have a wider council discussion around what do we mean with rates for Airbnb properties, what that might look like in terms of how that would be applied, how it would be implemented, how we would... so there's that one. And then the question of development contributions, I think that that is a quite significant policy that would need a lot more detail for councillors to decide whether or not that should simply be implemented. I mean,
it's not implemented.
Well, it's around, it says to be incorporated where possible, so I take that as meaning...
Yeah, it always comes back. It always comes back, and there's work that's been done on these for over a period of time, and so some of them are actually probably nearing the stage where they can come back to us. But while it says to be incorporated where possible, it certainly always comes back to council, either through the operations monitoring or the strategy, policy and finance.
I think
I was just concerned about the wording of that.
Just to add in on that, I think where it is saying to be incorporated where possible, it means the comments and stuff, how can they be rolled into and used for then bringing back to you when we go through a piece of work around introducing a new policy or the likes. It doesn't mean just because that feedback has come in that it is going to be incorporated without a decision from yourselves. And as the consultation document did say around the development contributions policy, there is a considerable amount of work that needs to go in before we can even get to a policy stage on the table. And the introduction of a development contributions policy is a special consultative process in its own right.
Thank you. So we're not trying to short-circuit anything, it's just that these ones here, and I suspect it's because there's already the work that's been done on them. And there may well be, there will be, particularly development financial implications, but at this stage, it's just referred back to the business unit to see what further work is required. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, does the council know how many Airbnb they've got on their books, and how are we going to?
Well, I think we've already started that discussion, and that's a big piece of work that's going to come back to us again. Some of that, we've already been looking at some of that, trying to think of, which way with. Oh yes, that's a big piece, and I don't know if we're looking around the country. I know we're looking at other places. We're getting to that stage.
These are captured, and when we do the rates review, the issue of Airbnb comes to us in a full paper.
Absolutely.
Yeah, with the number and how we're rating, and should we change the rating, and it'll have recommendations. So that is going to come to us.
And the other thing too is we do try to look around the country to see what else is happening, so that we can think if there's a better practice going on somewhere that might well, with some amendments, suit our situation, we could perhaps use that. But that's some way away, I think, some of these areas. Yes, Councillor Kumar.
Yeah, Madam Chair, supplementary to that was for the reason is that we already have a lack of accommodation. We don't want to kill this with such high rating that it becomes that people don't want to put their houses on for Airbnb, so that visitors can come and stay and choose the type of staying that they want. Otherwise, it's ultimately the higher fees will become, the higher user pays will become as well. So I hope this is managed very.
Yeah. Well, I think it would certainly come back for us to raise the very points that you're raising and have discussion on that too. Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank Councillor Kaifong for clarifying that as well, because I was uncomfortable with it. As it's worded, it does seem like that's what we're going to do, but I look forward to having that further discussion in future. And also, just wanted to withdraw my comment previously around the targeted sewage rate. It's actually acknowledged here, and I agree it's better for the finance business unit than the infrastructure business unit to deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'll put that. Oh yes, Councillor Kaifong.
I'm not sure that it hasn't been moved yet, but I just wondered, because I know we're saying that there is still going to be a further consultation period. The way this reads, if there was an amendment where it just simply says that the committee refers the feedback to the finance business unit, full stop, because I still think there's a perception that where it says to be incorporated where possible is that that's a direction to the business unit, finance business unit, to be taking on board what that feedback is, and I still think we need to have that wider discussion, and so it should just simply we refer it back to the business unit, and then when you are ready to come back to us with the full consultation, discussion, whatever, then we can have an open discussion without it being coloured by positive recommendation.
Thank you. I'm happy for that if we can just...
So if I could move that recommendation with
thank you.
That.
Thank you, Councillor Kaifong. I'll second that, councillors. So that the committee note the feedback and that the committee refers the feedback to the finance business unit. So all those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried.
We'll share. I've run out of juice. So, yes, I think so. So this one here, there has been a specific request through, and this one will be noted for feedback, and I suppose in vein with the one prior, will be referred through to the operations business unit.
Thank you. I just want... Yes, certainly, Your Worship.
Much as I love history, I think with our need to restore our museum, that we can make a decision. This is a philanthropic group of ambassadors and trying to do something in France. I really think this is one where we keep the home fires burning. And
note the feedback on that one, and there's no... Yes, that's right. I don't think there's necessary to even take a... No, thank you. Yes, Councillor Maxwell.
Yes, and this place is a sister city of Cambridge, I think it is. I remember them talking about it, and it was on television last year. So, yeah, I think keep the home fires burning on our one first.
So that one there is just for noting, councillors.
Yes, so if everybody's comfortable, I think maybe we'd take off point 2, so we just note, yep, that the feedback's been received.
Thank you. Oh, I think we can... We're just noting it, aren't we? Do we need
I'll get a second, yeah.
We don't actually need... Oh, thank you. All right, there we are. It's been moved by Mr Thomas, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. So we'll take... I'll move that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried.
Some feedback here around continuing, water safety and continuing the work that is done there in partnership with the Regional Council, and just really, I guess, highlighting the ongoing importance of having a regional water safety strategy. So noting this feedback and again passing this one through to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council in case they haven't got this feedback.
Thank you, Mr Thomas. You're moving that?
Yes, I'll move that, and I have a brief comment too.
Thank you. Bang.
Yeah. Look, I think it is absolutely appropriate to refer this to Bay of Plenty Regional Council, but just for committee's knowledge, just like to let everyone know that we have a new harbour master overall and a new manager of the, sort of new manager for Rotorua Lakes as well. They've come and met with the community board at our last meeting. They're very keen to work with council, community board and our communities around the lakes to develop and enhance the services they're providing. So we look forward to a good working relationship with them on this, and I'm sure we'll be talking about these issues on an ongoing basis with them.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as presented to us by the Regional Council when they presented on their draft long-term plan, and it's they had that community safety proposal that will fund the likes of Coast Guard and rescue services, lifeguards and so forth. So I think, again, this is most appropriate response.
Put that recommendation that the committee note the feedback and that the committee refer this request to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried.
Some feedback and everything received around the importance and the consideration of the environment, and I guess just highlighting here those ongoing partnerships and conversations that need to be kept up on an ongoing basis with many partners, and that and I suppose in looking forward at about how council and the role of ourselves in that space as well, potentially linked through to proposals in the Climate Action Plan as well. And there's a reference there in that one around SNA. So again, these comments just to be taken on board, noting the feedback and referring the feedback through to mainly the Sports, Recreation and Environment business unit.
Thank you. Can we just move it up? Oh, thank you. There we are. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for that? Thank you, Councillor Wang. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Your Worship, you want to? Thank you.
This is an opportunity for us to signal a more joined-up approach that we are working on locally. We're working with Te Rotorua Lakes Trust about land use and the impact of land use on water, and they are going for jobs for nature funding, for biodiversity programs, and we are part of that. So it's great if we say that we're working with iwi providers, especially Te Rotorua Lakes Trust, and very closely with DOC.
Yes.
So, you know, we should show our sort of partnership approach.
Mrs. Trumper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just on SNAs and where Waikato Regional Council are going with their funding, I'd also like to ask Council to consider the Rural Community Board involvement in this, because it is the rural community that will be affected. It's not just Te Aroa, and I think that we are all needing to be a part of any SNA or biodiversity conversation.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that reminder, Mrs. Trumper. So it's been moved and seconded. I'll put that recommendation that the committee note their feedback, that the committee refers the feedback to the Sports, Recreation, Environment Business Unit for consideration. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you. Carried.
There has been a request from the Linton Park Community Centre for some funding. As we haven't been looking at increasing the overall funding budget in these conversations. Again, just noting this feedback and referring this request through to the Operations Business Unit.
Yes, thank you.
Partnership funding, you know, when we do that round, I think.
I would think that would be right. Yes.
So I guess that, yeah, this is one where going back to, in the first instance, back to the centre and having initial conversations with them around where they can seek additional funding from would be the first one to call.
So it's been moved and seconded,
No.
Thank you, Councillor. We might just move that over here. Still being recorded? Thank you. Sorry, we're just about there, folks. So that the committee note the feedback and that the committee refers the feedback to the Operations Business Unit for consideration. Thank you. Oh, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
You need a mover and a seconder.
Oh, thanks. Mrs. Trumper, seconded. Yes, so I'll put that in favour, please say aye. Thank you, carried.
This is the last one, Madam Chair.
Doing well.
Yeah. So there has been a request through that Council retain the financial support it provides for community organisations via our various grants. So the long-term plan, of course, includes that overall funding portfolio, I guess, for the various organisations. There is then a separate process that is run once the long-term plan funding portfolio is signed off to go through where organisations are in terms of their applying for ongoing funding. A lot of those partnerships that are there are on a 3-year cycle, I believe it is. So the first point of call is to, in adopting the long-term plan, that overall funding allocation is retained, and then there's a separate process that goes through the allocation of the funds to the different groups.
Thank you, Una. Thank you, Mrs. Trumper.
So just in the interests of transparency, I just need to point out that I actually volunteer at the Citizens Advice Bureau and have done for 14 years, but I am not part of their board. So I'd like to support it, but I think I'll just sit back for this one.
Thank you. Thank you. Going to move it. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Councillor Yates. Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you, Councillor
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. I just had a question. We did have some submissions that requested specifically whether they could have funding or grants. As an example, Sport Bay Plenty Strategic Partnership requesting for active recreation and an increase in the grant that we currently provide. I think there were other ones around community patrols and safety. And just a question on whether that feedback from those submissions could also come into this. It's just not clear on there, but I would like to think that they would be considered and encouraged to apply for whatever grant is most appropriate.
So thank you, Councillor. Yes, so that's what I was meaning around the first step is to actually, in approving the long-term plan, you are committing to that overall funding allocation for community grants. The second stage then is how that is allocated to the different groups in that. So the feedback that is received will be part of that whole process.
Councillor Donaldson.
Madam Chair, at their last AGM, there was much made of the fact that the funding partnership grant to neighbourhood support was significantly reduced. I just would like to know, in terms of our commitment to additional funding for community safety, will there be some discussion with neighbourhood support as an organisation to how they can contribute to community safety and, you know, start that conversation at least? It might not necessarily come with funding, but just I'd just like to put that on the table at this late stage because they do have a role to play, but it might involve a change of focus by them going forward. I think it's just a useful network.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a point for noting. Mrs. Trumper? I think there's a point for noting, Councillor Donaldson.
Oh, okay. I was just going to point out that they actually had a workshop for all partnership and neighbourhood matching fund applicants. They had a workshop the other day here in Council, so everybody is well aware of what is coming up, and Council should note that this was actually taken away from the LTP, whereas it has sat before. So I just need to remind people that the workshop has happened.
Thank you very much. We've got a mover and a seconder for that recommendation, that the committee note the feedback and that the committee refers the feedback to the Strategy Business Unit for consideration. So I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you very much. Una, was that that was the last one? Councillor Maxwell.
I ask, Madam Chair, on our agenda today, page 34, I thought it might have come up in amongst all those, but Una, can you explain to me, acknowledge the requests with the Springfield Golf on the declare Springfield Golf Course a taonga, and number 2, continue leasing the land to the Springfield. Did we address that in any way?
I think what we did was when we took the amendment and we voted on the amendment, then that's
didn't come back.
Yes, that superseded that one there. So that's what it. So that'll be the discussion. That'll be the discussion that we'll have at some other stage, and not in the near future, I don't think. Sorry. Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, just because I won't be at the table when this goes to Council and the LTP is approved, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank staff who did a huge, stellar job at all our community hui. I really enjoyed going along to them with them, and I really appreciated that they went out to our non-urban communities as well. It was fantastic. Thank you very much to Una and her team.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, Mrs. Trumper.
Thank you. That's very remiss of me. I would actually like to thank Council for the opportunity for Te Tato and for the Rural and Lakes Community Board to actually participate in the deliberations. I feel it is beneficial. This is one way that we can actually participate in a full and meaningful way, rather than putting in a submission, because a submission actually negates our ability to debate and deliberate. And so I would like to thank Una for her support in this, and I also would like to pass my hearty thanks on to Una's team, because this has been a significant piece of work.
Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. So that concludes the feedback on our long-term plan, 2021 to 2031. Thank you so much for the discussions today, for your presence, everyone who attended the community meetings and also at the workshops as well. I do want to thank you, Your Worship, for during our discussions in the last couple of days, for in many instances actually leading the discussions on the recommendations that under the various topics that we discussed. Mrs. Trumper and Mr. Thomas, and of course, thank you so much, Potawa, also, because you do bring the perspective of the rural community and the lakes and Te Arawa, and you bring that perspective that would be sorely missed if you weren't present during our discussions over the last couple of days. So thank you very much for that. Actually, we've had some very good discussions, actually, and I know, and I've heard from a couple of you, that sometimes we've been a bit disappointed when our councillor colleagues haven't quite lined up as we thought they might have around the various recommendations. But that's as it is. That's as it is. And so we're not a groupthink organisation. Everybody is entitled to their views, whether we like it or not. But however, the discussion has been really good. I do also take the opportunity to thank you, Jeff, your team who've been with us over the last few days, and Una, but not only the last few days, but actually the last 6 months and even further back, actually putting the time and effort into making sure that we could make some informed decisions and undertake our leadership role, being very informed with the information that you've provided for us. So thank you very much, councillors, and I would perhaps like to ask Your Worship if there's a final word from you. I'm happy if you'd like to comment.
I do really believe this has been all been said, but I heard Councillor Tapsell say something very profound yesterday. This is our one big job as elected members. Participating in it and being here while we make these decisions is absolutely critical for us as elected members. Otherwise, we're hanging council as a whole group out to dry. So this is the one that we have to own, and I believe we have owned it. Yeah, I think it's very important that we all participate, and the majority of us have. And I've really valued that. I've enjoyed you chairing. It's brought out great discussion, a few low blows that are unnecessary, really. When we're thinking about the big issues, you don't muck around on the bottom stuff. You keep it high and you keep it moving. And I think we've done that. We've done it in the way we've interacted with the public. They were respectful meetings, and we enjoyed actually sometimes listening to each other's view too, as we tried to explain aspects of this LTP to the public, because a lot of it does need translation. It's often a lot of gobbledygook, really. And I remember your comment also about some people think wards are rooms in a hospital, you know, and we know what they are if we're talking about them. But that's our role, is to translate, really, so our public understand and then feel inspired to participate, to make a difference. There's been some huge decisions made over this time, and I'm very proud of us as a council. We're signalling a very new way forward, and it's a way built on partnerships. That's what we must never lose. We don't go back to the old paradigm that we're just about core services. We're far bigger than that. We're about shaping our people and our communities and in the environment in which they live. So well done everybody who took part in it. I think it's very tiring. I look forward to the debrief on the process, actually, because I'm sure we'll look at even making it better next time. But thank you all for participating, and we've made some momentous decisions.
Thank you. So could I, someone like to close our meeting, please?
Apai, nō reira, māku tō tātou hui hei whakakapi. Kia hihiri tātou, kia whakairi a te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, haumi e hui e, tai ki e, kia ora.